The Supreme Court just voted to end affirmative action. Now, the court's conservative majority voted in favor of doing away with the admissions policy at Harvard and the University of North Carolina, and will most likely end at most colleges and universities around the nation. Now, if you're not sure what affirmative action is, it was a policy meant to reverse decades of discrimination against Black and brown people being admitted to college. The policy allowed schools to consider someone's race as a factor in college admission, which helped increase diversity on college campuses around the country. So Chief Justice Roberts wrote in his opinion, quote, "The student must be treated based on his or her experiences as an individual, not on the basis of race." So what do we all think of the Supreme Court's decision and the fact that affirmative action is essentially over? What would you say, Erica?
I think this is a very interesting conversation because we keep talking about race, but affirmative action has actually disproportionately benefited white women more than any other demographic in this country. In the Civil Rights Act of 1964, sex was the only qualifier mentioned, and that was done so in order to sway conservative votes or people who might have been bigoted in their opinions in terms of race. We have to remember the history of this country, and it wasn't just Black people who weren't considered human and didn't have civil rights or the ability to vote. That demographic also included white women. If you go back to 95, 6 million white women benefited from affirmative action because those were 6 million white women who were afforded the opportunity for jobs in the workforce that they otherwise would have been discriminated against, and there was a bias set in the hiring process that excluded them. If you move forward to 2012, white women enrolled in college at 72%, where men were at 62%. So there is a very interesting conversation happening because we're so focused on race. But the truth is that white women are the loudest in the opposition against affirmative action, but benefit from it the most.
There's historical context to that as well. You're shaking your head. What are you thinking?
That was beautifully said. I love when I learn something on the show and I'm kind of just listening instead of being on the show.
Forgetting
you're on TV.
Like,
I love when that happens because I was like, that's super cool. Speaking of affirmative action, you were talking about, women, right? When I think of affirmative action, I think a lot of people, you think of black and white, and that's not what it is, right? Especially with universities. The problem with the affirmative action was in the Asian culture, right? Asian people were not allowed into Harvard because so many people were getting in, so many Asian people were getting in, they put a cap on it. And that's not fair to the people who got straight A's their whole life and their dream was to go to Harvard, and sorry, we have too many Asian people here, you can't come here. That's discrimination in itself, right? Best person for the job, best student for the school. That's where we need to get. In a way, I'm glad we're getting rid of that. Doesn't mean there wasn't racism or there still is, but we need best person for the job, period. And I understand that's a racial thing, but you're going to break down the social part of it, which I think is more important, actually.
Well, yeah, I mean, Jeff.
Social class part.
And I appreciate both of you guys' perspective, and that's what I love about this show. And as you were talking, Jeff, I was like, it's weird that I'm not thinking, you would think I would naturally default to thinking about black folks, but I can't get that image out of my head from COVID. Do you remember those young Hispanic kids getting the Wi-Fi from the Taco Bell when people were trying to learn via Zoom? And I was like,
because of internet inequity?
Right, because of internet. So I'm like, are those kids going to be judged on the same criteria as my kids? Is that fair? I really don't understand how we can decide that we're going to make things totally equal at the top when at the bottom people come in at all different places. The way that we showed up in this country, what we showed up to in this country, who we showed up as, how we identify. Are we a woman? Are we a trans woman? Are we a deaf person? All these things need to be factored in, and the fact that we just uniformly do away with this. 9 unelected people, 2 of them were crammed in by probably the least popular president of all time. I don't think there was a day where his popularity was over 50%, so that means there was never one time where Donald Trump was more popular than he wasn't. I don't care about Trump. I'm just saying he elected 2 people that are fairly young to a lifetime appointment. So we have unelected people. Another one, Clarence Thomas, whose credibility is severely in question as he was shown on votes with donors. So we have a credibility issue. I don't even know who these people are. I don't think most people on the street could identify 1 or 2 Supreme Court justices, and they've made 2 landmark overturning cases in the span of 6-8 months.
Speaking of Roe v. Wade,
Roe v.
as well.
Wade,
I'm
who
now
are these people?
Right, and I look, when it comes to education, I look at like what the Department of Education is saying, professors, their union, and educators are saying this is rolling back progress. Because if you really want to make things equal, you would do away with donors and the benefits of the kids that get into institutions based on donors. There's employee families, legacy families, there's a lot of different things. So if you're really going to try to make it equitable, which you can't, because to your point, the way you described it is so clear that when you come from different situations, that embodies your work, that embodies who you are, and you do have to weigh that out. And admissions are going down.
Yeah.
Since certain institutions in California have done away with affirmative action, they've seen that they have less admissions from Black and brown people, and the schools are less diverse. So you really do need to weigh this out. You need to have discernment. This isn't just a black and white issue, and I don't say that as a pun.
Yeah. Oh, right.
There's a lot of nuance when you look at
all
admissions.
nuance, yes.
It's all nuance. So I think this is a step in the wrong direction. I think that we're going to look at a precedent now where we're going to look at diversity in workplaces. I do not think this is a good thing. I feel really
But is it fair to hire
it.
certain people even if they're not qualified based on X factors?
But that's not what affirmative action does. Affirmative action is leveling the playing field to say that you can't discriminate against a person based on gender. You can't discriminate against a person based on race. And because that discrimination has historically been in context of the foundation of our country, there was a need for the Civil Rights Act. There was a need for affirmative action because there wasn't anyone to hold these people accountable.
Correct, and I agree with that. I agree with that. I just think in today's society, we're making a black-white issue. It had to do with the Asian culture and the way the culture is, period, in
and
colleges.
You're talking about the university level, which
yes.
I do think there's a PR thing behind that.
Yeah.
And we have YouTube that you can go to during the
Yeah, we're
break
out of
and we
time.
can
We're
talk
going
about
to
it.
continue the conversation because there's a lot here to discuss. We'll be right back.